This is the last segment of Martian Chronicles. December 2036, the Silent Towns. There was a little white silent town on the edge of the dead Martian sea. The town was empty. No one moved in it. Lovely lights burned in the stores all day. The shop doors were wide, as if people had run off without using their keys. Magazines brought from Earth on the silver rocket a month before fluttered, untouched, burning brown on wire racks fronting the silent drugstores. The town was dead. Its beds were empty and cold. The only sound was the power hum of electric lines and dynamos still alive all by themselves. Water ran in forgotten bathtubs, poured out into living rooms, onto porches, and down through little garden plots to feed neglected flowers. In the dark theaters, gum under the many seats began to harden, with tooth impressions still in it. Across town was a rocket port. You could still smell the hard, scorched smell where the last rocket blasted off when it went back to Earth. If you dropped a dime in the telescope and pointed it at Earth, perhaps you could see the big war happening there. Perhaps you could see New York explode. Maybe London could be seen, covered with a new kind of fog. Perhaps then it might be understood why this small Martian town is abandoned. How quick was the evacuation? Walk in any store, bang the no-sale key. Cash drawers jumped out, all bright and jiggly with coins. That war on Earth must be very bad. Along the empty avenues of this town, now whistling softly, kicking a tin can ahead of him in deepest concentration, came a tall, thin man. His eyes glowed with a dark, quiet look of loneliness. He moved his bony hands in his pockets, which were tinkling with new dimes. Occasionally, he tossed a dime to the ground. He laughed temperately, doing this, walked on, sprinkling bright dimes everywhere. His name was Walter Grip. He had a placer mine in a remote shack far up in the blue Martian hills, and he walked to town once every 2 weeks to see if he could marry a quiet and intelligent woman. Over the years, he'd always returned to his shack alone and disappointed. A week ago, arriving in town, he'd found it this way. That day, he'd been so surprised that he rushed to a delicatessen, flung wide a case, and ordered a triple-decker beef sandwich. "Coming up," he cried, a towel on his arm. He flourished meats and bread baked the day before, dusted a table, invited himself to sit, and ate until he had to go find a soda fountain, where he ordered a bicarbonate. The druggist, being one Walter Grip, was astoundingly polite and fizzed one right up for him. He stuffed his jeans with money, all he could find. He loaded a boy's wagon with $10 bills and ran lickety-split through town. Reaching the suburbs, he suddenly realized how shamefully silly he was. He didn't need money. He rode the $10 bills back to where he'd found them, counted $1 from his own wallet to pay for the sandwiches, dropped it in the delicatessen till, added a quarter tip. That night, he enjoyed a hot Turkish bath, succulent fillet carpeted with delicate mushrooms, imported dry sherry, and strawberries in wine. He fitted himself for a new blue flannel suit and a rich gray Homburg which balanced oddly atop his gaunt head. He slid money into a jukebox which played that old gang of mine. He dropped nickels in 20 boxes all over town. The lonely streets and the night were full of the sad music of that old gang of mine as he walked, tall and thin and alone, his new shoes clumping softly, his cold hands in his pocket. But that was a week past. He slept in a good house on Mars Avenue, rose mornings at 9, bathed and idled to town for ham and eggs. No morning passed that he didn't freeze a ton of meats, vegetables, and lemon cream pies, enough to last 10 years, till the rockets came back from Earth, if they ever came. Now, tonight, he drifted up and down, seeing the wax women in every colorful shop window, pink and beautiful. For the first time, he knew how dead the town was. He drew a glass of beer and sobbed gently. "Why," he said, "why, I'm all alone." He entered the elite theater to show himself a film, to distract his mind from his isolation. The theater was hollow, empty, like a tomb with phantoms crawling gray and black on the vast screen. Shivering, he hurried from the haunted place. Having decided to return home, he was striking down the middle of a side street, almost running, when he heard the phone. He listened. Phone, ringing in someone's house. He proceeded briskly. Someone should answer that phone, he mused. He sat on a curb to pick a rock from his shoe idly. "Someone!" he screamed, leaping. "Me! Good Lord, what's wrong with me?" He shrieked. He whirled. Which house? That one. He raced over the lawn, up the steps, into the house, down a dark hall. He yanked up the receiver. "Hello!" he cried. "Bzzz. Hello! Hello!" They had hung up. "Hello!" he shouted and banged the phone. "You stupid idiot!" he cried to himself. "Sitting on that curb, you fool! You damned and awful fool!" He squeezed the phone. "Come on, ring again. Come on." He never thought there might be others left on Mars. The entire week he had seen no one. He figured that all the other towns were as empty as this one. Now, staring at this terrible little black phone, he trembled. Interlocking dial systems connected every town on Mars. From which of 30 cities had the call come? He didn't know. He waited. He wandered to the strange kitchen, thawed some iced huckleberries, ate them disconsolately. There wasn't anyone on the other end of that call, he murmured. Maybe a pole blew down somewhere and the phone rang by itself. But hadn't he heard a click, which meant someone had hung up far away? He stood in the hall the rest of the night. Not because of the phone, he told himself. I just haven't anything else to do. He listened to his watch tick. She won't phone back, he said. She won't ever call a number that didn't answer. She's probably dialing other houses in town right now. Here I sit. Wait a minute, he laughed. Why do I keep saying she? He blinked. Could as easily be a he, couldn't it? His heart slowed. He felt very cold and hollow. He wanted very much for it to be a she. He walked out of the house and stood in the center of the early, dim morning street. He listened. Not a sound. No birds, no cars, only his heart beating. Beat and pause and beat again. His face ached with strain. The wind blew gently, oh so gently, flapping his coat. Shh, he whispered. Listen. He swayed in a slow circle, turning his head from one silent house to another. She'll phone more and more numbers, he thought. Must be a woman. Why? Only a woman would call and call. A man wouldn't. Man's independent. Did I phone anyone? No. Never thought of it. Must be a woman. Has to be, by God. Listen. Far away, under the stars, a phone rang. He ran. He stopped to listen. The ringing soft. He ran a few more steps. Louder. He raced down an alley. Louder still. He passed 6 houses, 6 more. Much louder. He chose a house and its door was locked. The phone rang inside. Damn you! He jerked the doorknob. The phone screamed. He heaved a porch chair through the parlor window, leaped in after it. Before he even touched the phone, it was silent. He stalked through the house then and broke mirrors, tore down drapes, kicked in the kitchen stove. Finally, exhausted, he picked up the thin directory which listed every phone on Mars. 50,000 names. He started with number 1, Amelia Ames. He dialed her number in New Chicago, 100 miles over the Dead Sea. No answer. Number 2 lived in New York, 5,000 miles across the Blue Mountains. No answer. He called 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, his fingers jerking, unable to grip the receiver. A woman's voice answered. Hello? Walter cried back at her. Hello! Oh, Lord, hello! This is a recording, recited the woman's voice. Miss Helen Arasumian is not home. Will you leave a message on the answering machine so she may call you when she returns? Hello? This is a recording. Miss Arasumian is not home. Will you leave a message? He hung up. He sat with his mouth twitching. On second thought, he redialed that number. When Miss Helen Arasumian comes home, he said, tell her to go to hell. He phoned Mars Junction, New Boston, Arcadia, Roosevelt City exchanges, theorizing they would be logical places for persons to dial from. After that, he contacted local city halls and other public institutions in each town. He phoned the best hotels. Leave it to a woman to put herself up in luxury. Suddenly he stopped, clapped his hands sharply together, and laughed. Of course! He checked the directory and dialed a long-distance call through to the biggest beauty parlor in New Texas City. If ever there was a place where a woman would putter around, patting mud packs on her face and sitting under a dryer, it'd be a velvet-soft, diamond-gem beauty parlor. The phone rang. Someone at the other end lifted the receiver. A woman's voice said, Hello. If this is a recording, announced Walter Grip, I'll come over and blow the place up. This isn't a recording, said the woman's voice. Hello. Oh, hello, there is someone alive. Where are you? She gave a delighted scream. Walter almost collapsed. You. He stood up jerkily, eyes wild. Good Lord, what luck. What's your name? Genevieve Seltzer. She wept into the receiver. Oh, I'm so glad to hear from you, whoever you are. Walter Grip. Walter. Hello, Walter. Hello, Genevieve. Walter. It's such a nice name. Walter. Walter. Thank you. Walter, where are you? Her voice was so kind and sweet and fine. He held the phone tight to his ear so she could whisper sweetly into it. He felt his feet drill off the floor. His cheeks burned. I'm in Marlin Village, he said. Buzz. Hello, he said. Buzz. He jiggled the hook. Nothing. Somewhere a wind had blown down a pole. As quickly as she had come, Genevieve Seltzer was gone. He dialed, but the line was dead. I know where she is anyway. He ran out of the house. The sun was rising as he backed a beetle car from the stranger's garage, filled his backseat with food from the house, set out at 80 miles an hour down the highway, heading to New Texas City. 1,000 miles, he thought. Genevieve Seltzer, sit tight. You'll hear from me. He honked his horn on every turn out of town. At sunset, after an impossible day of driving, he pulled to the roadside, kicked off his tight shoes, laid himself out in the seat, and slid the gray Homburg over his weary eyes. His breathing became slow and regular. The wind blew, and the stars shone gently upon him in the new dusk. The Martian mountains lay all around, millions of years old. Starlight glittered on the spires of a little Martian town, no bigger than a game of chess in the blue hills. He lay in the half place between awakeness and dreams. He whispered, Genevieve. Oh, Genevieve, sweet Genevieve, he sang softly. The years may come, the years may go, but Genevieve, sweet Genevieve, there was warmth in him. He heard a quiet, sweet, cool voice sighing. Hello. Oh, hello, Walter. This is no record. Where are you, Walter? Where are you? He sighed, putting up a hand to touch her in the moonlight. Long, dark hair shaking in the wind. Beautiful, it was, and her lips like red peppermints, her cheeks like fresh-cut wet roses, and her body like a clear vaporous mist, while her soft, cool, sweet voice crooned to him once more the words to the old sad song, Oh, Genevieve, sweet Genevieve, the years may come, the years may go. He slept. He reached New Texas City at midnight. He halted before the deluxe beauty salon, yelling. He expected her to rush out, all perfume, all laughter. Nothing happened. She's asleep. He walked to the door. Here I am, he called. Hello, Genevieve. The town lay in double moonlit silence. Somewhere a wind flapped a canvas awning. He swung the glass door wide and stepped in. Hey, don't hide. I know you're here. He searched every booth. Found a tiny handkerchief on the floor. Smelled so good he almost lost his balance. Genevieve, he said. He drove the car through the empty streets but saw nothing. This is a practical joke. He slowed the car. Wait a minute. We were cut off. Maybe she drove to Marlin Village while I was driving here. She probably took the old sea road. We missed each other during the day. How'd she know I'd come to get her? I didn't say. I didn't say I would. And she was so afraid when the phone died that she rushed to Marlin Village to find me. Here I am, by God. What a fool I am. Giving the horn a blow, he shot out of town. He drove all night. He thought, what if she isn't in Marlin Village waiting when I arrive? He wouldn't think of that. She must be there. He would run up and hold her and perhaps even kiss her once on the lips. Genevieve, sweet Genevieve, he whistled, stepping it up to 100 miles an hour. Marlin Village was quiet at dawn. Yellow lights were still burning in several stores, and a jukebox that had played steadily for 100 hours finally, with a crackle of electricity, ceased, making the silence complete. The sun warmed the streets and warmed the cold and vacant sky. Walter turned down Main Street, the car lights still on, honking the horn a double toot, 6 times at one corner, 6 times at another. He peered at the store names. His face was white and tired, and his hand slid on the sweaty steering wheel. Genevieve, he called in the empty street. The door to a beauty salon opened. Genevieve! He stopped the car. Genevieve Seltzer stood at the open door of the salon as he ran across the street. A box of cream chocolates lay open in her arms. Her fingers, cuddling it, were plump and pallid. Her face, as she stepped into the light, was round and thick, Her eyes were like two immense eggs stuck into a white mess of bread dough. Her legs were as big around as the stumps of trees, and she moved with an ungainly shuffle. Her hair was an indiscriminate shade of brown that had been made and remade, it appeared, as a nest for birds. She had no lips at all, compensated this by stenciling on a large, red, greasy mouth that now popped open in delight, now shut in sudden alarm. She plucked her brows to thin antenna lines. Walter stopped. His smile dissolved. He stood looking at her. She dropped her candy box to the sidewalk. "Are you Genevieve Seltzer?" His ears rang. "Are you Walter Griff?" she asked. "Grip." "Grip," she corrected herself. "How do you do?" he said with a restrained voice. "How do you do?" She shook his hand. Her fingers were sticky with chocolate. "Well," said Walter Grip. "What?" asked Genevieve Seltzer. "I just said well," said Walter. "Oh." It was 9 o'clock at night. They had spent the day picnicking. For supper he had prepared a filet mignon, which she didn't like because it was too rare. So he broiled it some more, and it was too much broiled or fried or something. He laughed and said, "We'll see a movie." She said, "Okay," put her chocolate fingers on his elbow. All she wanted to see was an 80-year-old film of Clark Gable. "Doesn't he just kill you?" she giggled. "Doesn't he kill you now?" The film ended. "Run it off again," she commanded. "Again?" he asked. "Again," she said. When he returned, she snuggled up and put her paws all over him. "You're not quite what I expected, but you're nice," she admitted. "Thanks," he said, swallowing. "Oh, that Gable," she said, and pinched his leg. "Ouch," he said. After the film, they went shopping down the silent streets. She broke a window and put on the brightest dress she could find. Tapping a perfume bottle on her hair, she resembled a drowned sheepdog. "How old are you?" he inquired. "Guess." Dripping, she led him down the street. "Oh, 30, he said. "Well," she announced stiffly, "I'm only 27, so there." "Here's another candy store," she said. "Honest, I've led the life of Riley since everything exploded. I never liked my folks. They were fools. They left for Earth 2 months ago. I was supposed to follow on the last rocket, but I stayed on. You know why?" "Why?" "Because everyone picked on me. So I stayed where I could throw perfume on myself all day, drink 10,000 malts, and eat candy without people saying, 'Oh, that's full of calories.' So here I am." "Here you are." Walter shut his eyes. "It's getting late," she said, looking at him. "Yes." "I'm tired," she said. "Funny. I'm wide awake." "Oh," she said. "I feel like staying up all night," he said. "Hey, there's a good record at Mike's. Come on, I'll play it for you." "I'm tired." She glanced up at him with sly, bright eyes. "I'm very alert," he said. "Strange." "Come back to the beauty shop," she said. "I want to show you something." She took him in through the glass door and walked him over to a large white box. "When I drove from Texas City," she said, "I brought this with me." She untied the pink ribbon. "I thought, well, here I am, the only lady on Mars. Here's the only man. And, well," she lifted the lid and folded back crisp layers of whisper pink tissue paper. She gave it a pat. "There." Walter Grip stared. "What is it?" he asked, beginning to tremble. "Don't you know, silly? It's all lace and all white and all fine and everything." "No, I don't know what it is." "It's a wedding dress, silly." "Is it?" His voice cracked. He shut his eyes. Her voice was still soft and cool and sweet, as it had been on the phone. When he opened his eyes and looked at her, he backed up. "How nice," he said. "Isn't it?" "Genevieve," he glanced at the door. "Yes?" "Genevieve, I've something to tell you." "Yes?" She drifted toward him, the perfume smell thick about her round white face. "The thing I have to say to you is," he said. "Yes?" "Goodbye." He was out the door and into his car before she could scream. She ran and stood on the curb as he swung the car about. "Walter Griff, come back here," she wailed, flinging up her arms. "Grip," he corrected her. "Grip," she shouted. The car whirled away down the silent street, regardless of her stomping and shrieking. The exhaust from it flooded the white dress she crumpled in her plump hands. The stars shone bright. The car vanished out onto the desert and away into the blackness. He drove all night and all day for 3 nights and days. Once he thought he saw a car following, broke into a shivering sweat, and took another highway, cutting off across the lonely Martian world, past little dead cities, and he drove and drove for a week and a day, till he had put 10,000 miles between himself and Marlin Village. Then he pulled into a small town named Holtville Springs, where there were some tiny shops he could light up at night and restaurants to sit in ordering meals. And he's lived there ever since, with 2 deep freezers packed with food to last him 100 years, enough cigars to last 10,000 days, a good bed with a soft mattress. And when once in a while, over the long years, the phone rings, he doesn't answer. April 2057. The long years. Whenever the wind came through the sky, he and his small family would sit in the stone hut and warm their hands over a wood fire. The wind would stir the canal waters and almost blow the stars out of the sky. But Mr. Hathaway would sit contentedly and talk to his wife. His wife would reply. He would speak to his 2 daughters and his son about the old days on Earth. They would all answer neatly. It was the 20th year after the Great War. Mars was a tomb planet. Whether or not Earth was the same was a matter for much silent debate for Hathaway and his family on the long Martian nights. This night, one of the violent Martian dust storms had come over the low Martian graveyards, blowing through ancient towns and tearing away the plastic walls of the newer, American-built city that was melting down into the sand, desolated. The storm abated. Hathaway went out into the cleared weather to see Earth burning green on the windy sky. Put his hand up as one might reach to adjust a dimly burning globe in the ceiling of a dark room. He looked across the long dead sea bottoms. Not another living thing on this entire planet, he thought. Just myself. And them. He looked back within the stone hut. What was happening on Earth now? He could see no visible sign of change in Earth's aspect through his 30-inch telescope. Well, he thought, I'm good for another 20 years if I'm careful. Someone might come, either across the dead seas or out of space in a rocket or a little thread of red flame. He called into the hut. I'm going to take a walk. All right, his wife said. He moved quietly down through a series of ruins. Made in New York, he read from a piece of metal as he passed. All these things from Earth will be gone long before the old Martian towns. He looked toward the 50 centuries old village that lay among the Blue Mountains. He came to a solitary Martian graveyard, a series of small hexagonal stones on a hill swept by the lonely wind. He stood looking down at 4 graves with crude wooden crosses on them and names. Tears did not come to his eyes. They had dried long ago. Do you forgive me for what I've done? He asked of the crosses. I was very much alone. You do understand, don't you? He returned to the stone hut and once more, just before going in, shaded his eyes, searching the black sky. You keep waiting and looking, he said. One night, perhaps, there was a tiny red flame on the sky. He stepped away from the light of the hut. And you look again, he whispered. The tiny red flame was still there. Wasn't there last night, he whispered. He stumbled and fell, picked himself up, ran behind the hut, swiveled the telescope, and pointed it at the sky. A minute later, after a long, wild staring, he appeared in the low door of the hut. The wife and 2 daughters and the son turned their heads to him. Finally, he was able to speak. I have good news, he said. I have looked at the sky. A rocket is coming to take us all home. We'll be here in the early morning. He put his hands down and put his head into his hands and began to cry gently. He burned what was left of New York that morning at 3. He took a torch and moved into the plastic city, and with the flame touched the walls here or there. The city bloomed up in great tosses of heat and light. It was a square mile of illumination, big enough to be seen out in space. It would beckon the rocket down to Mr. Hathaway and his family. His heart beating rapidly with pain, he returned to the hut. See? He held up a dusty bottle into the light. Wine I saved just for tonight. I knew that someday someone would find us. We'll have a drink to celebrate. He poured 5 glasses full. It's been a long time, he said, gravely looking into his drink. Remember the day the war broke? 20 years and 7 months ago. All the rockets were called home from Mars. You and I and the children were out in the mountains doing archaeological work, research on the ancient surgical methods of the Martians. We ran our horses, almost killing them, remember? We got here to the city a week late. Everyone was gone. America had been destroyed. Every rocket had left without waiting for stragglers. Remember? Remember? It turned out we were the only ones left. Lord, Lord, how the years pass. I couldn't have stood it without you here, all of you. I'd have killed myself without you. But with you, it was worth waiting. Here's to us, then. He lifted his glass. To our long wait together. He drank. The wife and the 2 daughters and the son raised their glasses to their lips. The wine ran down over the chins of all 4 of them. By morning, the city was blowing in great black soft flakes across the sea bottom. The fire was exhausted. It served its purpose. The red spot on the sky grew larger. From the stone hut came the rich brown smell of baked gingerbread. His wife stood over the table, setting down the hot pans of new bread as Hathaway entered. The 2 daughters were gently sweeping the bare stone floor with stiff brooms. The son was polishing the silverware. We'll have a huge breakfast for them, laughed Hathaway. Put on your best clothes. He hurried across his land to the vast metal storage shed. Inside was the cold storage unit and power plant he'd repaired and restored with his efficient, small, nervous fingers over the years, just as he had repaired clocks, telephones, and spool recorders in his spare time. The shed was full of things he had built, some senseless mechanisms, the functions of which were a mystery even to himself now, as he looked upon them. From the deep freeze he fetched rhymed cartons of bean and strawberries, 20 years old. Lazarus, come forth, he thought, pulled out a cool chicken. The air was full of cooking odors when the rocket landed. Like a boy, Hathaway raced down the hill. He stopped once because of a sudden sick pain in his chest. He sat on a rock to regain his breath, then ran all the rest of the way. He stood in the hot atmosphere generated by the fiery rocket. The port opened. A man looked down. Hathaway shielded his eyes and at last said, Captain Wilder. Who is it? Asked Captain Wilder, and jumped down and stood there looking at the old man. Put his hand out. Good Lord, it's Hathaway. That's right. They looked into each other's faces. Hathaway, from my old crew, from the 4th expedition. It's been a long time, Captain. Too long. It's good to see you. I'm old, said Hathaway simply. I'm not young myself anymore. I've been out to Jupiter and Saturn and Neptune for 20 years. I heard they'd kicked you upstairs so you wouldn't interfere with colonial policy here on Mars. The old man looked around. You've been gone so long you don't know what's happened. Wilder said, I can guess. We've circled Mars twice. Found only one other man, named Walter Grip, about 10,000 miles from here. We offered to take him with us, but he said no. Last we saw of him, he was sitting in the middle of the highway in a rocking chair, smoking a pipe, waving to us. Mars was pretty well dead. Not even a Martian alive. What about Earth? You know as much as I do. Once in a while I get the Earth radio, very faintly. It's always in some other language. Sorry to say I only know Latin. A few words come through. I take it most of Earth's a shambles, but the war goes on. Are you going back, sir? Yes. We're curious, of course. We had no radio contact so far out in space. We'll want to see Earth no matter what. You take us with you? The captain started. Of course, your wife. I remember her. 25 years ago, wasn't it? When they opened First Town and you quit the service and brought her up here. And there were children. My son and 2 daughters. Yes, I remember. They're here. Up at our hut. There's a fine breakfast waiting all of you up the hill. Will you come? We would be honored, Mr. Hathaway. Captain Wilder called to the rocket. Abandon ship. They walked up the hill, Hathaway and Captain Wilder, the 20 crew members following, taking deep breaths of the thin, cool morning air. The sun rose, and it was a good day. Do you remember Spender, Captain? I've never forgotten him. About once a year I walk up past his tomb. Looks like he got his way at last. He didn't want us to come here. I suppose he's happy now that we've all gone away. What was his name? Parkhill, Sam Parkhill? He opened a hot dog stand. Sounds just like him. And went back to Earth the next week for the war. Hathaway put his hand to his chest and sat down abruptly upon a boulder. I'm sorry. The excitement. Seeing you again after all these years. Have to rest. He felt his heart pound. He counted the beats. It was very bad. We've a doctor, said Wilder. Excuse me, Hathaway. I know you are one, but we'd better check you with our own. The doctor was summoned. I'll be all right, insisted Hathaway. The waiting The waiting, the excitement, he could hardly breathe. His lips were blue. You know, he said as the doctor placed a stethoscope to him, it's as if I kept alive all these years just for this day. Now you're here to take me back to Earth. I'm satisfied. I can just lay down and quit. Here, the doctor handed him a yellow pellet. We better let you rest. Nonsense. Just let me sit a moment. It's good to see you all. Good to hear new voices again. Is the pellet working? Fine. Here we go. They walked on up the hill. Alice, come see who's here. Hathaway frowned and bent into the hut. Alice, did you hear? His wife appeared. A moment later, the two daughters, tall and gracious, came out, followed by an even taller son. Alice, you remember Captain Wilder? She hesitated and looked at Hathaway, as if for instructions, and then smiled. Of course, Captain Wilder. I remember we had dinner together the night before I took off for Jupiter, Mrs. Hathaway. She shook her hand vigorously. My daughters, Marguerite and Susan. My son, John. You remember the captain, surely? Hands were shaking and laughed amid laughter and much talk. Captain Wilder sniffed the air. Is that gingerbread? Will you have some? Everyone moved. Folding tables were hurried out while hot foods were rushed forth and plates and fine damask napkins and good silverware were laid. Captain Wilder stood looking first at Mrs. Hathaway, then at her son, her two tall, quiet-moving daughters. He looked into their faces as they darted past, and he followed every move of their youthful hands and every expression of their wrinkleless faces. He sat upon a chair the son brought. How old are you, John? The son replied, 23. Wilder shifted his silverware clumsily. His face was suddenly pale. The man next to him whispered, Captain Wilder, that can't be right. The son moved away to bring more chairs. What's that, Williamson? I'm 43 myself, Captain. I was in school the same time as young John Hathaway there, 20 years ago. He says he's only 23 now. He only looks 23, but that's wrong. He should be 42 at least. What's it mean, sir? I don't know. You look kind of sick, sir. I don't feel well. The daughters, too. I saw them 20 years or so ago. They haven't changed. Not a wrinkle. Will you do me a favor? I want you to run an errand, Williamson. I'll tell you where to go and what to check. Later in the breakfast, slip away. It'll take you only 10 minutes. The place isn't far from here. I saw it from the rocket as we landed. Here, what are you talking about so seriously? Mrs. Hathaway ladled quick spoons of soup into their bowls. Smile now, we're all together. The trip's over. It's like home. Yes, Captain Wilder laughed. You certainly look very well and young, Mrs. Hathaway. Isn't that like a man? He watched her drift away, drift with her pig face warm, smooth as an apple, unwrinkled and colorful. She chimed her laugh at every joke. She tossed salads neatly, never once pausing for breath. And the bony son and curved daughters were brilliantly witty, like their father, telling of the long years in their secret life, while their father nodded proudly to each. Williamson slipped off down the hill. Where's he going? Said Hathaway. Checking the rocket, said Wilder. As I was saying, Hathaway, there's nothing on Jupiter, nothing at all for men. That includes Saturn and Pluto. Wilder talked mechanically, not hearing his words, thinking only of Williamson running down the hill and climbing back to tell what he had found. Thanks. Marguerite Hathaway was filling his water glass. Impulsively, he touched her arm. She did not even mind. Her flesh was warm and soft. Hathaway, across the table, paused several times, touched his chest with his fingers painfully, then went on listening to the murmuring talk and sudden loud chattering, glancing now and then with concern at Wilder, who did not seem to like chewing his gingerbread. Williamson returned. He sat picking at his food until the captain whispered aside to him, Well, I found it, sir. And? Williamson's cheeks were white, kept his eyes on the laughing people. The daughters were smiling gravely, and the son was telling a joke. Williamson said, I went into the graveyard. The 4 crosses were there? The 4 crosses were there, sir. The names were still on them. I wrote them down to be sure. He read them from white paper. Alice, Marguerite, Susan, and John Hathaway. Died of unknown virus, July 2038. Thank you, Williamson. Wilder closed his eyes. 19 years ago, sir. Williamson's hand trembled. Yes. Then who are these? I don't know. What are you going to do? I don't know that either. Will you tell the other men? Later. Go on with your food as if nothing happened. I'm not very hungry now, sir. The meal ended with wine brought from the rocket. Hathaway arose. A toast to all of you. It's good to be with friends again. And to my wife and children, without whom I couldn't have survived alone. It's only through their kindness and caring for me that I've lived on, waiting for your arrival. He moved his wine glass toward his family, looked back self-consciously, lowering their eyes, at last as everyone drank. Hathaway drank down his wine, did not cry out as he fell forward onto the table and slipped to the ground. Several men eased him to rest. The doctor bent to him and listened. Wilder touched the doctor's shoulder. The doctor looked up and shook his head. Wilder knelt and took the old man's hand. Wilder, Hathaway's voice was barely audible. I spoiled the breakfast. Nonsense. Say goodbye to Alice and the children for me. Just a moment. I'll call them. No, don't, gasped Hathaway. They wouldn't understand. I wouldn't want them to understand. Don't. Wilder did not move. Hathaway was dead. Wilder waited for a long time. Then he arose and walked away from the stunned group around Hathaway. He went to Alice Hathaway, looked into her face, and said, Do you know what has just happened? Something about my husband? He's just passed away. His heart, said Wilder, watching her. I'm sorry, she said. How do you feel? He asked. He didn't want us to feel badly. He told us it would happen one day, and he didn't want us to cry. He didn't teach us how, you know. He didn't want us to know. He said it was the worst thing that could happen to a man, to know how to be lonely, know how to be sad, and then to cry. So we're not to know what crying is or being sad. Wilder glanced at her hands, the soft, warm hands and the fine manicured nails and the tapered wrists. He saw her slender, smooth, white neck and her intelligent eyes. Finally he said, Mr. Hathaway did a fine job on you and your children. He would have liked to hear you say that. He was so proud of us. After a while, he even forgot that he had made us. At the end, he loved and took us as his real wife and children. And in a way, we are. We gave him a good deal of comfort. Yes, for years on end, we sat and talked. He so much loved to talk. He liked the stone hut and the open fire. We could have lived in a regular house in the town, but he liked it up here, where it could be primitive if he liked, or modern if he liked. He told me all about his laboratory and the things he did in it. He wired the entire dead American town below with sound speakers. When he pressed a button, the town lit up and made noises as if 10,000 people lived in it. There were airplane noises and car noises and the sounds of people talking. He would sit and light a cigar and talk to us. The sounds of the town would come up to us. Once in a while the phone would ring and a recorded voice would ask Mr. Hathaway scientific and surgical questions, and he would answer them. The phone ringing and us here and the sounds of the town and his cigar, Mr. Hathaway was quite happy. And the one thing he couldn't make us do, she said, that was to grow old. He got older every day. We stayed the same. I guess he didn't mind. I guess he wanted us this way. We'll bury him down in the yard where the other 4 crosses are. I think he would like that. She put her hand on his wrist lightly. I'm sure he would. Orders were given. The family followed the little procession down the hill. 2 men carried Hathaway on a covered stretcher. They passed the stone hut and the storage shed where Hathaway, many years before, had begun his work. Wilder paused within the workshop door. How would it be, he wondered, to live on a planet with a wife and 3 children and have them die, leaving you alone with the wind and the silence? What would a person do? Bury them with crosses in the graveyard and come back up to the workshop with all the power of mind and memory and accuracy of finger and genius, put together, bit by bit, all those things that were wife, son, daughter. With an entire American city below from which to draw needed supplies, a brilliant man might do anything. The sound of their footsteps was muffled in the sand. At the graveyard, as they turned in, 2 men were already spading out the earth. They returned to the rocket in the late afternoon. Williamson nodded at the stone hut. What are we going to do about them? I don't know, said the captain. Are you going to turn them off? Off? The captain looked faintly surprised. Never entered my mind. You're not taking them back with us. No, it would be useless. You mean you're going to leave them here, like that, as they are? The captain handed Williamson a gun. If you can do anything about this, you're a better man than I. 5 minutes later, Williamson returned from the hut, sweating. Here, take your gun. I understand what you mean now. I went in the hut with the gun. One of the daughters smiled at me. So did the others. The wife offered me a cup of tea. Lord, it'd be murder. Wilder nodded. There'll never be anything as fine as them again. They're built to last 10, 50, 200 years. Yes, they've as much right to life as you and I or any of us. He knocked out his pipe. Well, get aboard. We're taking off. City's done for. We'll not be using it. It was late in the day. Cold wind was rising. The men were aboard. Captain hesitated. Williamson said, Don't tell me you're going back to say goodbye to them. The captain looked at Williamson coldly. None of your business. Wilder strode up toward the hut through the darkening wind. The men in the rocket saw his shadow lingering in the stone hut doorway. They saw a woman's shadow. They saw the captain shake her hand. Moments later, he came running back to the rocket. On nights when the wind comes over the Dead Sea bottoms, through the hexagonal graveyard, over four old crosses and one new one, there's a light burning in the low stone hut. In that hut, as the winds roar, and the dust whirls, and the cold stars burn, are 4 figures, a woman, 2 daughters, a son, tending a low fire for no reason, and talking and laughing. Night after night, for every year, for no reason at all, the woman comes out and looks at the sky, her hands up for a long moment, looking at the green burning of earth, not knowing why she looks. Then she goes back and throws a stick on the fire. The wind comes up, and the Dead Sea goes on being dead. August 2057. There will come soft rains. In the living room, the voice clock sang, tick-tock, 7 o'clock, time to get up, 7 o'clock, as if it were afraid that nobody would. The morning house lay empty. The clock ticked on, repeating and repeating its sound into the emptiness. 7-9, breakfast time, 7-9. In the kitchen, the breakfast stove gave a hissing sound and ejected from its warm interior 8 pieces of perfectly brown toast, 8 eggs, sunny side up, 16 slices of bacon, 2 coffees, 2 cool glasses of milk. Today is August 4, 2057, said a second voice from the kitchen ceiling. In the city of Allendale, California. It repeated the date 3 times for memory's sake. Today is Mr. Featherstone's birthday. Today is the anniversary of Talita's marriage. Insurance is payable, as are the water, gas, and light bills. Somewhere in the walls, relays clicked. Memory tapes glided under electric eyes. 8-1. Tick-tock. 1 o'clock. Off to school, off to work. Run, 8-1. But no doors slammed. No carpets took the soft tread of rubber heels. It was raining outside. The weather box on the front door sang quietly, Rain, rain, go away. Rubber's raincoats for today. The rain tapped on the empty house, echoing. Outside, the garage chimed and lifted its door to reveal the waiting car. After a long wait, the door swung down again. At 8:30, the eggs were shriveled, and the toast was like stone. An aluminum wedge scraped them into the sink, where hot water whirled them down a metal throat which digested and flushed them away to the distant sea. The dirty dishes were dropped into a hot washer and emerged twinkling dry. 9:15, sang the clock. Time to clean. Out of warrens in the wall, tiny robot mice started. The rooms were a crawl with the small cleaning animals, all rubber and metal. They thudded against chairs, whirling their mustached runners, kneading their rug nap, sucking gently at hidden dust. Then, like mysterious invaders, they popped into their burrows. The pink electric eyes faded. The house was clean. 10 o'clock. The sun came out from behind the rain. The house stood alone in a city of rubble and ashes. This was the one house left standing. At night, the ruined city gave off a radioactive glow which could be seen for miles. 10:15. The garden sprinklers whirled up in golden founts, filling the soft morning air with scatterings of brightness. The water pelted window panes, running down the charred west side where the house had been burned evenly free of its white paint. The entire west face of the house was black, save for 5 places. Here the silhouette in paint of a man mowing the lawn. Here, as in a photograph, a woman bent to pick flowers. Still farther over, their images burned on wood in one titanic instant. A small boy, hands flung into the air, higher up the image of a thrown ball, and opposite him a girl's hand raised to catch a ball which never came down. The 5 spots of paint, the man, the woman, the children, the ball, remained. The rest was a thin charcoal layer. The gentle sprinkler rain filled the garden with falling light. Until this day, how well the house had kept its peace. How carefully it had inquired, "Who goes there? What's the password?" And getting no answer from lonely foxes and whining cats, it shut up its windows and drawn shades in an old maidenly preoccupation with self-protection which bordered on a mechanical paranoia. It quivered at each sound, the house did. If a sparrow brushed a window, the shade snapped up. The bird, startled, flew off. No, not even a bird must touch the house. The house was an altar with 10,000 attendants, big, small, servicing, attending, in choirs. But the gods had gone away, and the ritual of the religion continued senselessly, uselessly. 12 noon. A dog whined, shivering on the front porch. The front door recognized the dog voice and opened. The dog, once huge and fleshy, now gone to bone and covered with sores, moved in and through the house, tracking mud. Behind it whirled angry mice, angry at having to pick up mud, angry at inconvenience. For not a leaf fragment blew under the door, but what the wall panels flipped open and the copper scrap rats flashed swiftly out. The offending dust, hair, or paper, seized in miniature steel jaws, was raced back to the burrows. There, down tubes which fed into the cellar, was dropped into the sighing vent of an incinerator, which sat like evil bale in a dark corner. The dog ran upstairs, hysterically yelping to each door, at last realizing, as the house realized, only silence was here. It sniffed the air and scratched the kitchen door. Behind the door, the stove was making pancakes, which filled the house with a rich baked odor, the scent of maple syrup. The dog frothed at the mouth, lying at the door, sniffing, its eyes turned to fire, ran wildly in circles, biting at its tail, spun in a frenzy, and died. Lay in the parlor for an hour. 2 o'clock, sang a voice. Delicately, sensing decay at last, the regiments of mice hummed out as softly as blown gray leaves in an electrical wind. 2:15. The dog was gone. In the cellar, the incinerator glowed suddenly, and a whirl of sparks leaped up to the chimney. 2:35. Bridge tables sprouted from patio walls. Playing cards fluttered onto pads in a shower of pips. Martinis manifested on an oaken bench with egg salad sandwiches. Music played. But the tables were silent, and the cards untouched. At 4 o'clock, the tables folded like great butterflies back through the paneled walls. 4:30. The nursery walls glowed. Animals took shape. Yellow giraffes, blue lions, pink antelopes, lilac panthers cavorting in crystal substance. The walls were glass. They looked out upon color and fantasy. Hidden films clocked through well-oiled sprockets, and the walls lived. The nursery floor was woven to resemble a crisp cereal meadow. Over this ran aluminum roaches and iron crickets, and in the hot, still air, butterflies of delicate red tissue wavered among the sharp aroma of animal spores. There was a sound like a great matted yellow hives of bees within a dark bellows, the lazy bumble of a purring lion. And there was the patter of okapi feet and the murmur of a fresh jungle rain, like other hooves, falling upon the distant summer-starched grass. Now the walls dissolved into distances of parched weed, mile on mile, and warm, endless sky. The animals drew away into thorn breaks and water holes. It was the children's hour. 5 o'clock. The bath filled with clear hot water. 6, 7, 8 o'clock. The dinner dishes manipulated like magic tricks, and in the study a click. The metal stand opposite the hearth, where a fire now blazed up warmly, a cigar popped out, half an inch of soft gray ash on it, smoking, waiting. 9 o'clock. The beds warmed their hidden circuits, for nights were cool here. 9:05. A voice spoke from the study ceiling. "Mrs. McClellan, which poem would you like this evening? The house was silent. The voice said at last, "Since you express no preference, I shall select a poem at random." Quiet music rose to back the voice. "Sarah Teasdale, as I recall, your favorite. There will come soft rains and the smell of the ground, and swallows circling with their shimmering sound, and frogs in the pools singing at night, wild plum trees in tremulous white. Robins will wear their feathery fire, whistling their whims on a low fence wire. And not one will know of the war, not one will care at last when it is done. Not one would mind, neither bird nor tree, if mankind perished utterly. And spring herself, when she woke at dawn, would scarcely know that we were gone." The fire burned on the stone hearth, and the cigar fell away into a mound of quiet ash on its tray. The empty chairs faced each other between the silent walls, and the music played. At 10 o'clock, the house began to die. The wind blew. A falling tree bough crashed through the kitchen window. Cleaning solvent, bottled, shattered over the stove. The room was ablaze in an instant. "Fire!" screamed a voice. The house lights flashed. Water pumps shot water from the ceilings. The solvent spread on the linoleum, licking, eating, under the kitchen door, while the voices took it up in chorus. "Fire! Fire! Fire!" The house tried to save itself. Doors sprang tightly shut. The windows were broken by the heat, and the wind blew and sucked upon the fire. The house gave ground as the fire and 10 billion angry sparks moved with flaming ease from room to room and then up the stairs, while scurrying water rats squeaked from the walls, pistoled their water, and ran for more. And the wall sprays let down showers of mechanical rain, but too late. Somewhere, sighing, a pump shrugged to a stop. The quenching rain ceased. The reserve water supply, which had filled baths and washed dishes for many quiet days, was gone. The fire crackled up the stairs. It fed upon Picassos and Matisses in the upper halls, like delicacies, baking off the oily flesh, tenderly crisping the canvases into black shavings. Now the fire lay in beds, stood in windows, changed the color of drapes, and then reinforcements. From attic trapdoors, blind robot faces peered down with faucet mouths gushing green chemical. The fire backed off, as even an elephant must at the sight of a dead snake. Now there were 20 snakes whipping up over the floor, filling the fire with a clear, cold venom of green froth. But the fire was clever. It sent flames outside the house, up through the attic to the pumps there. An explosion. The attic brain which directed the pumps was shattered into bronze shrapnel on the beams. The fire rushed back into every closet and fell to the clothes hung there. The house shuddered. Oak bone on bone, spared skeleton cringing from the heat. Its wire, its nerves, revealed as if a surgeon had torn the skin off to let the red veins and capillaries quiver in the scalded air. "Help! Help! Fire! Run! Run!" Heat snapped mirrors like the brittle winter ice. The voices wailed, "Fire! Fire! Run! Run!" like a tragic nursery rhyme. A dozen voices, high, low, like children dying in a forest, alone, alone. The voices fading as the wires popped their sheathing like hot chestnuts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 voices died. In the nursery, the jungle burned. Blue lions roared. Purple giraffes bounded off. The panthers ran in circles, changing color, and 10 million animals running before the fire vanished off toward a distant steaming river. 10 more voices died. The last instant, under the fire avalanche, other choruses, oblivious, could be heard announcing the time, playing music, cutting the lawn by a remote control mower, or setting an umbrella frantically out, and in the slamming and opening front door, 1,000 things happening, like a clock shop when each clock strikes the hour insanely before or after the other, scene of maniac confusion, yet unity, singing, screaming, a few last cleaning mice darting bravely out to carry the horrid ashes away. One voice, with sublime disregard for the situation, read poetry aloud in the fiery study, till all the film spools burned, till all the wires withered and the circuits cracked. The fire burst the house and let it slam flat down, puffing out skirts of spark and smoke. In the kitchen, an instant before the rain of fire and timber, the stove could be seen making breakfast at a psychopathic rate. 10 dozen eggs, 6 loaves of toast, 20 dozen bacon strips, which, eaten by fire, started the stove working again, hysterically hissing. The crash, The attic smashing into kitchen and parlor. The parlor into cellar, cellar into subcellar. Deep freeze, armchair, film tapes, circuits, beds, all like skeletons thrown in a clustered mound deep under. Smoke and silence. A great quantity of smoke. Dawn showed faintly in the east. Among the ruins, one wall stood alone. In the wall, a last voice said over and over again and again, even as the sun rose to shine upon the heaped rubble and steam. Today is to August 5, 2057. Today is August 5, 2057. Today is